What a U.S. prosecutor calls the biggest military computer hack in all time.
A British hacker accused of breaking into Pentagon and NASA system.
Russia indeed, suspect number one here at the Pentagon.
Imagine hacking into the Pentagon with nothing but a dial-up connection whirring away in your modest bedroom. Sounds impossible, right? But in 2001, a British man named Gary McKinnon did exactly that, breaching 97 US military and NASA computers in what officials called the biggest military computer hack of all time. The motivation? Well, Gary was just innocently asking a simple question. What's up with UFOs? He discovered instead that America's most sensitive military networks were protected by default passwords and missing security patches. The story that followed would spark an international incident lasting over a decade, raising unexpected questions about ethics, mental health, and justice. The unlikely hacker. Meet Gary McKinnon, not a criminal mastermind with sophisticated tools or a spy with years of classified training. Instead, picture a quiet British systems administrator with thinning hair and thick glasses, working ordinary IT jobs in North London. By day, he helped small businesses troubleshoot computer problems. By night, he transformed into what US prosecutors would eventually call the perpetrator of the biggest military computer hack of all time. What drives an ordinary man to challenge the digital defenses of the world's military superpower? For McKinnon, it wasn't money or political ideology that fueled his late-night hacking sessions. It was the age-old story of a silly person finding silly conspiracy theories and beginning to believe. As is always the case in conspiracy theory believers, Gary became the main character of an intense X-Files-like story, where he, of course, played a sort of Fox Mulder figure. McKinnon was consumed by the conviction that the US government was concealing evidence of alien contact and revolutionary technology from the public. Quote, I knew that government suppressed anti-gravity, UFO-related technologies, free energy, or what they call zero-point energy, end quote, McKinnon would later explain in interviews. This was a mission for him. He genuinely believed he was performing a public service by exposing what he saw as a massive cover-up affecting humanity's future. Now, as harsh as it is, it's not inaccurate to call people like this just run-of-the-mill crackpots not to be paid attention to. The difference between most crackpots and old Gary McKinnon is ability and means to actually affect things for us non-crackpot regular people. But let's start with the basic setting for these ambitious digital break-ins. McKinnon conducted his systematic hacking campaign from the spare bedroom of his girlfriend's aunt's house in North London. The room smelled of old carpet and the faint electrical warmth of his constantly running computer. His arsenal consisted of nothing more impressive than a basic home computer with a painfully slow 56K dial-up modem, technology that would make today's internet users snap their keyboard in frustration after just minutes of use. Yet, between February 2001 and March 2002, this unassuming man with modest technical skills and primitive equipment managed to infiltrate 97 computers belonging to the US Army, Navy, Air Force, Department of Defense, and NASA. The sheer scale of his operation seemed almost impossible given his limited resources. While the world's attention was focused on the aftermath of 9/11 and the beginning of the War on Terror, allegedly built on lies about MDs, McKinnon was silently slipping through digital back doors that should have been locked tight. He was David facing a technological Goliath. Or at least he should have been. We'll get to that later. What made McKinnon's case even more complex was his Asperger's syndrome, a condition on the autism spectrum that wasn't diagnosed until years after his hacking activities. Asperger's is actually an outdated diagnosis, as it's since been folded into the general autism spectrum disorder category. Autism is, coming from a non-expert who just tries their best, a brain abnormality that occurs due to genetic factors and is present basically as soon as a fetus has anything you could call a brain. Symptoms include a difference in perception of the world and behavioral differences from peers who you'd call neurotypical. One of the symptoms can possibly explain the single-minded intensity with which Gary pursued his UFO investigations. As he scanned thousands of systems each night, his focus was absolute. The outside world faded away as he methodically searched for evidence, his fingers moving mechanically across the keyboard for hours without interruption, forgetting to eat or sleep, something you might call a hyperfocus. Quote, "The only reason I kept going was because I knew there was stuff there," end quote. McKinnon would later say. His autism-influenced obsession is said to have overridden normal considerations about risk and legality. The condition also contributed to what his lawyers would later argue was a diminished understanding of the gravity of his actions. While most people might recognize the severe consequences of breaking into military computers, McKinnon's focus remained fixed on his mission to uncover the truth. As someone with diagnosed ASD myself, I'd like to call BS on the diminished responsibility claim, but anyway. Perhaps most startling about McKinnon's hacking spree was how easily he succeeded. Working with nothing more sophisticated than commercially available software and basic scanning techniques, he uncovered systemic weaknesses in what should have been some of the most secure networks on the planet. What McKinnon claimed to find would fuel conspiracy theories for years, but beneath these sensational claims lies something perhaps more significant. The revelation that a man with no specialized training, working with technology that was outdated even in 2001, could penetrate the goddamn Pentagon. The Pentagon's paper walls. Behind the Pentagon's imposing concrete walls and armed guards lay a digital security system with all the sophistication of a child's toy lock. The shocking truth? McKinnon didn't need to be a programming genius or employ advanced hacking techniques to penetrate these systems. He simply found the unlocked windows in what should have been an impenetrable fortress, raising a disturbing question. If one man with a dial-up connection could walk right in, who else had been silently exploring America's military networks? The American military complex projects an image of technological supremacy, cutting-edge weapon systems, satellite surveillance networks, and intelligence capabilities that seem almost omniscient. Their digital infrastructure was presumed to be equally formidable, protected by layers of sophisticated firewalls, encryption, and security protocols that would require nation-state resources to breach. These were, after all, the systems controlling nuclear arsenals and housing the nation's most closely guarded military secrets. But what McKinnon discovered painted a starkly different picture. Instead of encountering the digital equivalent of Fort Knox, he found networks protected by nothing more substantial than flimsy security measures and gaping vulnerabilities. McKinnon's methodology was shockingly basic. First, he utilized a program in the Perl programming language to begin a brute force scouring of publicly available data on government systems connected to the internet, specifically saving the IP addresses of computers whose usernames were unedited from the default. This would indicate that the passwords might still be the default as well. He succeeded, and just like that, he had access to the computers in the Pentagon. He then installed remote access programs and got to work. The security lapses he exploited would make even the most junior IT professional cringe. Imagine leaving your house locked with a keypad, but having never changed the original password to something other than 1234. Taking advantage of the time difference between the UK and the United States, McKinnon established a methodical work routine. While Pentagon staffers slept, he prowled their networks under cover of darkness. Operating during these off-peak hours minimized his risk of detection, allowing him to scan networks, identify vulnerable machines, and establish persistent access without interruption. This access persisted for months. McKinnon could return to compromised systems repeatedly, exploring their contents and moving deeper into the network infrastructure. The fact that his activities were undetected for so long further highlights the inadequacy of monitoring within these supposedly secure environments. The fundamental weaknesses he exploited represented the most basic failures of cybersecurity hygiene. This vulnerability wasn't isolated to a single facility or branch of the military. McKinnon's systematic approach revealed a systemic problem spanning multiple military branches, NASA's facilities, and defense contractors. Digital fingerprints and cosmic secrets. The same systems McKinnon exploited so effortlessly harbored something far more tantalizing than military secrets. His digital fingerprints might have remained invisible had he simply looked around undetected. Instead, he transformed himself from a ghost to prime target by leaving provocative messages sprawled across government servers. Once again, we see the classic conspiracy theorist mindset at work. Gary was the main character of this story, and main characters need drama and, most importantly, recognition. Frustrated by what he saw as institutional cover-ups of extraterrestrial evidence, McKinnon defiantly announced on compromised systems, quote, "I am solo. I will continue to disrupt at the highest levels," end quote. This deliberate signature transformed his anonymous intrusion into a declaration of intent. More entertainingly, he also left the message, quote, "Your security system is crap," end quote, which he was quite right in saying. Each message left on these supposedly secure systems transformed his intrusion into a public embarrassment for America's defense establishment. His digital graffiti effectively issued a challenge that security agencies couldn't ignore, especially during a period of heightened national security concerns following 9/11. McKinnon's motivation for risking everything by transforming his covert operation into such a public spectacle stemmed from his conviction about what he discovered in these databases. He hunted evidence of extraterrestrial contact and technology that he believed governments were deliberately concealing from the public. The Johnson Space Center became his primary target. Here, McKinnon claimed NASA was manipulating UFO imagery before public release. During one session, he described encountering a photograph that validated his suspicions. A, quote, cigar-shaped object, end quote, featuring geodesic domes that appeared distinctly non-terrestrial. Just as he attempted to download this potential evidence, his connection was conveniently terminated, leaving him with a tantalizing glimpse but no definitive proof. None of these claims are verified, and to be clear, McKinnon has zero expertise in astrophysics, aerospace engineering, or literally any other relevant field which would qualify him to identify a simple image of something vaguely cigar-shaped. His most explosive allegation emerged from US Navy databases, where McKinnon claimed to have discovered a classified personnel roster titled, quote, non-terrestrial officers, end quote. This document, according to his accounts, contained names, ranks, and ship-to-ship transfer details of military personnel who weren't registered in any conventional database. Such records would suggest the existence of an off-world military presence, a space force operating decades before any public acknowledgement. McKinnon's claims extended to alleged discoveries about space-based weapons, no Marjorie, not Jewish ones, and suppressed free energy technology. In his mind, these were revolutionary advancements being deliberately withheld by powerful interests. He described finding a folder labeled Unfiltered, containing satellite imagery showing unusual spacecraft, fueling his conviction that he was uncovering genuine evidence of advanced non-terrestrial technology. The methodical nature of his search suggests McKinnon wasn't randomly browsing, but hunting specific information. His systematic targeting of NASA facilities and military systems reflected a man convinced he was on the verge of uncovering history-changing evidence. Each new system accessed represented another opportunity to find the definitive proof that had remained elusive, now for months. Critical examination, however, reveals significant problems with McKinnon's claims. While he described seeing compelling images and documents, he failed to secure copies before his connection was terminated. The US government has never acknowledged any of his alleged discoveries, obviously, dismissing them as misinterpretations or fabrications. Without independent verification, his claims remain unsubstantiated. And ask yourself one question. If the US had unlimited energy tech and space weapons, why the hell wouldn't they have obliterated China or Russia in a single blast by now? Yet, McKinnon's absolute conviction in what he saw continues to fuel speculation. Was he glimpsing classified evidence of extraterrestrial contact, or misinterpreting conventional military information through the lens of his pre-existing beliefs? The absence of downloadable proof leaves us with an unresolvable mystery that captivates those interested in both government secrecy and the possibility of extraterrestrial contact. The cost of curiosity. The irony of McKinnon's story lies in the contrast between intention and impact. He saw himself as an investigator exposing cosmic secrets, but the Pentagon saw something far more menacing: a cyber attacker who had crippled 2,000 military computers during America's highest state of alert since the Cold War. The consequences of his digital expedition were about to transform from theoretical to catastrophically real. McKinnon's timing couldn't have been worse. As America reeled from the September 11th attacks and military forces mobilized for what would become the War on Terror, the nation's defense apparatus operated at its highest state of readiness. In this climate of heightened tension, even minor disruptions could cascade into major security concerns. McKinnon's intrusions were anything but minor. At the US Army's Washington, D.C. Operations Center, the crisis unfolded like a ticking time bomb. Critical systems files vanished, networks collapsed, communication channels went dark. Within hours, approximately 2,000 computers across the entire military district crashed, remaining offline for a full 24 hours. This operational blackout struck precisely when every second of communication could determine mission success or failure. The damage extended to Naval Weapons Station Earl, where McKinnon compromised systems managing ammunition and ordnance. Weapons logs disappeared, critical tracking systems failed, the facility responsible for loading, unloading, and managing the Navy's deadly arsenal suddenly went blind. Military readiness obviously faltered during active deployment operations, the equivalent of cutting communication lines before battle. When those systems flatlined, it sent shockwaves throughout the Navy's supply chain, potentially affecting vessels already positioned in strategic locations worldwide. The financial damage reached approximately $700,000, covering emergency response, restoration, and security hardening. The reality gap between McKinnon's perception and his impact couldn't have been wider. While he considered himself a researcher uncovering extraterrestrial secrets, Pentagon officials saw a coordinated attack on vital national security infrastructure during wartime. His harmless digital exploration appeared identical to cyber terrorism in both effect and timing. As authorities grasped the full scope of McKinnon's intrusions, an inevitable question emerged. How would the world's military superpower respond to this attack on its command capabilities? The frameworks for traditional warfare had evolved over centuries, but the protocols for cyber incursions remained largely undefined. McKinnon would become the test case, helping to establish these boundaries. For US authorities, only one conclusion seemed possible. McKinnon's actions demanded the severest response available. The stakes transcended punishing one individual. This was about sending an unmistakable warning to future attackers. If a lone hacker with modest skills and a dial-up connection could cause such devastation, what might a well-funded adversary accomplish? America's response would shape cybersecurity's future landscape. International showdown. The Pentagon wanted their pound of flesh, but they never anticipated how a mother's fierce determination would change everything. The morning of March 2002 began like any other for Gary McKinnon, until police officers stormed his North London flat. The FBI had finally tracked him down, initiating what would become one of the most contentious extradition battles in modern history. Arrested under a warrant from US authorities, McKinnon suddenly faced an unimaginable reality: potential extradition to America, where prosecutors were preparing charges that could lock him away for up to 70 years. The severity of the potential punishment revealed the true agenda, making an example of McKinnon. While similar offenses in the UK might have resulted in a few years' imprisonment at most, the dramatic sentencing disparity highlighted fundamental differences between the two justice systems. What began as a case of unauthorized computer access transformed into a high-stakes international legal battle, when McKinnon found himself caught in a post-9/11 legal mechanism designed primarily for terrorism suspects. The formal US extradition request arrived on October 7, 2004, under a controversial new treaty that gave American authorities extraordinary latitude without requiring them to provide contestable evidence. This procedural imbalance elevated McKinnon's case from a simple computer trespass to a landmark legal fight that raised profound questions about sovereignty, mental health, and proportionate justice. Quote, "The fight for my son is about protecting vulnerable people from being shipped off to foreign prisons when they should be tried in their home countries," end quote. Janice Sharp, McKinnon's mother, told reporters as she transformed from private citizen into formidable advocate. The Free Gary movement gained momentum rapidly, evolving from a family's desperate effort into a cause célèbre. Protest signs appeared outside Parliament, while websites supporting McKinnon proliferated across the internet. High-profile supporters, including Sting, Pink Floyd's David Gilmour, and actress Julie Christie, lent their voices to what had become a public referendum on the extradition treaty itself. The legal proceedings dragged through British courts for years, until a 2008 medical diagnosis changed the case's trajectory. When specialists formally diagnosed McKinnon with Asperger's syndrome, the criminal case acquired profound human rights dimensions. Psychiatric evaluations indicated extradition would likely lead McKinnon to attempt self-unaliving, with experts testifying that his condition made him uniquely vulnerable to imprisonment overseas. The medical evidence transformed the technical legal debate into a moral dilemma, forcing both governments to confront questions about compassion's role in justice. The extradition treaty itself became a political lightning rod in Britain. Critics highlighted its fundamental imbalance. American authorities could extract British citizens without substantial evidence, while British prosecutors faced much higher standards when seeking Americans. This asymmetry fueled public perception that the treaty represented submission to American interests rather than partnership. For a decade, the case moved through an exhausting series of appeals, until October 16, 2012, when the then Home Secretary Theresa May made an unprecedented announcement that stunned observers on both sides of the Atlantic. Quote, "Mr. McKinnon is seriously ill," end quote, May declared to Parliament. Quote, "He has Asperger's syndrome and suffers from depressive illness," end quote. After reviewing extensive medical evidence, May blocked the extradition entirely, stating that forcing McKinnon to face American justice would be incompatible with his human rights, end quote. Her decision represented a victory for McKinnon and a significant assertion of British sovereignty. It established that mental health considerations could override international security agreements, setting precedents that would influence extradition cases for years to come. Conclusion. Today, Gary McKinnon lives a markedly different life than during his hacking days. He's rebuilt his existence as an SEO consultant in Leicester, helping businesses enhance their digital visibility. While he's found professional stability and even returned to writing music, the shadow of his past remains. He can't leave the UK due to the outstanding US warrant. And lastly, while he obviously bears responsibility for falling down conspiracy rabbit holes and hacking into and damaging military systems, none of the files or computers he accessed were actually classified. He caused damages, yes, but I'd argue the ridiculously lax security is equally to blame.